Hello, this is Aaron Mean of SG Gaming Info, and welcome to my video review of The Legend of Heroes Trails of Cold Steel for PlayStation 3 and PlayStation Vita. Before The Legend of Heroes Trails of Cold Steel, I had never played any of the games in the Legend of Heroes series, but I never felt as though my experience was being hampered by this fact. I'm pretty sure there's probably references to certain people and events that may have happened in previous games, but overall it didn't really seem to affect my experience. The Legend of Heroes Trails of Cold Steel is a character-driven game set in Thor's military academy. The academy trains high school students of both common and noble status, although both groups don't share the same class. This is until the school adds a 6th class, Class 7, and yes, calling the 6th class Class 7 makes very little sense if you think about it. Class 7 is unique in the academy, as it contains students from both common and noble descent. The main focus of this game is how the boys and girls of Class 7 interact and how they see the world. As the Trails of Cold Steel is a character-focused game, you would hope that each character is well fleshed out and interesting, and thankfully this is the case. The characters in Trails of Cold Steel are incredibly interesting, especially all 9 students in Class 7. Each student has their own personality, story arc, and the game explains why they act and behave the way they do. I never once found a student acting out of character. Apart from the students and supporting characters that you meet, the game does some great world building, with the game creating an interesting look at a world based around your status in society and the troubles that come with a class system. When playing through the game, I felt invested in each of the characters' struggles. One great example is of Machias Regnitz, who is a commoner, but his father is imperial governor in Heimdallar. Machias has a powerful hatred for nobles, with his early interactions involving fighting with a fellow student called Jusis, who is of noble descent, and asking each student whether they are commoner or noble. As the game progresses, Machias is exposed to various events involving nobles and commoners. These events allow Machias to grow, and as he grows we see his attitude begin to shift. Machias is just one example of great character development in this game. What helps the character development work so well is the game's dialogue, which XSEED, who published the game in North America, and NIS America, who published the game in Europe, did an amazing job of translating and making sure the dialogue conveyed the right tone. Now, moving away from the characters, how is the game's story? Well, the story is decent, but it takes a long time to get going. The story isn't boring, as I enjoyed how the game discussed its class-based society and how the system affects the world. Once you get past the discussions of class, we are treated to a story that shows the students of Class 7 just how dangerous the world can be. Now, moving back to the characters, let's talk about how the game is set up. Each chapter is broken into 2 parts. Part 1 involves student life in the academy, and part 2 is about exploring and experiencing the world and cultures of towns and cities outside of the academy with field studies. The academy sections are quite light-hearted and are built around growing bonds with your classmates, which is a task that is essential to the game's combat. Outside of bonding, you complete quests and do schoolwork such as exams and combat training. When you finish in the academy section, you move on to the field study portion of the chapter. In field studies, you are divided into teams and sent to a town/city to complete specific tasks over a 2 to 3 day period. These tasks are mostly built around gathering and kill quests. The field study section is also where the majority of the combat takes place. Personally, I'm not overly fond of the field study portion of each chapter, as they drag on for far too long and have cutscenes that seem to last forever. But field studies have to be endured, as important aspects of the game's story and character development are expanded upon in this section. Now, let's discuss combat. If I was to sum up Trails of Cold Steel's combat in one word, I would call the combat easy. When I say easy, I don't mean fights aren't challenging. By easy, I mean the lack of failure. Combat can be quite challenging, especially since I found myself being out-leveled on nearly every encounter, but despite being challenging and getting out-leveled, I still found it easy because of one important point: a game over is impossible. What I mean by this is, whenever you are defeated, you are given the opportunity to retry or have the enemies weakened and retry. Essentially, if you die enough times, enemies will be made so weak that you can defeat them by simply sneezing on them. The ability to weaken enemies after every time you're defeated takes away all urgency from combat, as you can just avoid all encounters and run to a story monster and die until the game makes it weak enough for you to kill. So as I said, combat is easy, but how does it work? Well, firstly, Trails of Cold Steel is turn-based focused for 4 active party members and 2 support members. Combat consists of several types of attacks, which include normal attacks, crafts attacks, arts attacks, and combat links attacks. Normal attacks are straightforward, so we'll avoid talking about that. Crafts attacks are skills that you acquire by leveling up and vary from character to character. These require CP, which is gained by dealing or receiving damage. Crafts attacks can be useful moves in combat, especially the support abilities, but if you let your CP reach maximum, you can perform an S-Crafts attack that allow you to do a large amount of damage at the cost of all your CP. While normal attacks and crafts attacks are the moves you will likely use the most often, there are 2 remaining attack types to mention. Arts attacks are attack or support moves that you give to characters via items known as quartz and master quartz. These quartz can be gained via quests or buying in shops, and can be placed in a character's ornament, which is the device that allows you to use quartz arts moves. Arts are essentially the technological form of magic. Now, arts attacks have one major drawback, and that is the fact that you have to charge them up. So when you select an arts attack, you have to wait another turn to use it. Finally, we have combat link attacks. Combat linking is essentially performing joint attacks or supporting a specific character you have bonded with. Your combat link ability depends on how well you bond with characters outside of combat. While you have 4 types of attacks, the game also throws in random status buffs. These buffs can happen on your players or the enemies, and some of the buffs include healing, regenerating EP or CP, guaranteeing a critical hit and allowing you to charge and use an art attack on the same move. So is there anything else to do besides fighting and bonding with classmates? Well, you can fish, cook and play a card game called Blade. All 3 non-combat skills aren't essential to completing the game, but they do act as fun side activities. Fishing allows you to gather points to buy items, the cooking skill allows you to make healing items in a cost-effective manner, and the card game allows you to increase your bond with your classmates. All 3 skills have an interesting mechanic attached to it. With fishing, you are given buttons to press in a quick time event setup. Cooking requires you to team up with a classmate, as the classmate assisting you can alter the food's status effects. And finally, Blade is just a simple card game you don't encounter in regular play. Now let's move to the more technical aspect of the game, the graphics and sound. Graphically, the game is a bit on the weak side. The game isn't ugly per se, as the game looks decent, but shadows are rugged, textures lose their luster when viewed up close, and at times it feels as though the character models don't work with the overall art style. However, I did get used to the models after playing for a while. In terms of standout issues with the graphical aspect of the game, I did encounter frame rate stutters during some cutscenes, as the aspect ratio does alter when you're transitioning from cutscene to gameplay and vice versa. With regards to sound, there are no major issues. The music suits each location perfectly, and the English dub of each character is well executed. So, in conclusion, The Legend of Heroes Trails of Cold Steel is a game that excels at character development and world building, but suffers from an easy combat and overly drawn out segments. With that said, I give The Legend of Heroes Trails of Cold Steel a score of 8 out of 10, with the game's pros being great character development, good world building, a great look into a class-based society, numerous side activities, and a great port by XSEED and NIS America. And the cons are, combat is too easy, and the field study segments go on for far too long. Thank you for watching. Please like, favourite and subscribe. For more gaming information, please visit sggaminginfo.com. And don't forget to like our Facebook page at facebook.com/sggaminginfo and follow us on Twitter at sggaminginfo.